I cannot help you at this branch.
My money is as good as anyone's.
You need to leave right now. Sir, I'm gonna have to ask you to step out of this line. We cannot help you here. If you're watching this, I'd love to get to know you. Please comment your location and the time below. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss our next story. Thank you so much for being here today.
Marcus Whitfield walked into a downtown Houston bank branch on a Tuesday afternoon still wearing the grass-stained t-shirt and worn work boots he'd had on all morning, cutting his own backyard before rushing to handle a business matter he'd promised himself he'd take care of before picking up his kids from school. He needed to process a large business transfer, routine paperwork he'd handled at that exact branch a dozen times before. He stepped up to the counter, greeted the cashier with the same easy politeness he extended to everyone, and gave his name. Melissa Grant looked him up and down, taking in the grass stains, the worn boots, the casual t-shirt, and said, loud enough for the customers waiting behind him to hear clearly, "Sir, this branch handles high-value business accounts. I think you might be looking for a different location. Maybe try the branch closer to the east side."
Sir, I'm gonna have to ask you to step out of this line. We cannot help you here. I cannot help you at this branch.
My money is as good as anyone's.
You need to leave right now.
Marcus stood there for a moment, absorbing the specific, deliberate condescension in her tone, understanding exactly what assumption she'd made about him based entirely on his appearance, and said nothing more than a calm, "I'll wait for someone else then." What Melissa Grant didn't know, dismissing the man standing in front of her without bothering to actually check his account information, was that Marcus Whitfield wasn't simply a customer at that branch. He was the majority shareholder of the holding company that owned the entire regional bank chain, a fact that was about to become considerably clearer to her within the following 20 minutes. Before I tell you exactly how that unfolded, if this is your first time here, go ahead and hit subscribe, because this story is worth staying for all the way through. Like this video if you believe every person deserves basic respect regardless of what they happen to be wearing. Share it with somebody who needs the reminder, and drop a comment below with the time and the city you're watching this from. I read every single one, and I love seeing exactly how far these stories travel. Now let me take you back to the beginning, to understand exactly who Marcus Whitfield really was, and exactly why he'd walked into that branch dressed the way he had that particular afternoon. Marcus Delane Whitfield built his fortune over nearly 2 decades, beginning with a single commercial cleaning company he started in his early 20s, funded by a modest loan and considerable determination, growing that initial business, gradually and deliberately, into a diversified holding company spanning commercial real estate, logistics, and over the past 6 years, a significant ownership stake in a regional banking chain operating across Texas and 3 neighboring states. He'd grown up in Houston's 3rd Ward, raised by parents who worked steadily but modestly, instilling in Marcus from an early age both a fierce work ethic and a specific, lasting understanding of exactly how differently the world tended to treat people based on outward appearance rather than actual character or capability. Marcus made a deliberate choice, even after his considerable financial success, to maintain a notably unpretentious personal presentation in his day-to-day life, driving a modest, practical vehicle rather than anything flashy, dressing casually outside of formal business settings, remaining deeply involved in the same 3rd Ward community where he'd grown up, coaching his own children's youth sports leagues, and handling ordinary weekend tasks like yard work personally rather than delegating them entirely to household staff. "I never wanted my kids growing up thinking success means becoming someone unrecognizable to the community that raised you," Marcus explained once, in a rare interview addressing his deliberately grounded lifestyle. "I can afford to look a certain way every single day of my life. I choose not to, because I never want to lose touch with exactly how it feels to be underestimated, and exactly how much that underestimation reveals about the person doing it, rather than anything true about me." The Tuesday morning at the center of this story began, for Marcus, in the same unremarkable way most of his Saturday and weekday mornings tended to unfold when his schedule allowed it, cutting his own backyard grass before the Houston heat became unbearable, a task he genuinely found relaxing despite having more than enough resources to hire it out entirely. He'd planned to shower and change before handling a business matter at his bank later that afternoon. A routine transfer of funds between two of his company's operating accounts. Work that required his personal authorization given the transaction's considerable size. A phone call from one of his property managers, addressing an unexpected issue at one of his commercial developments, pushed his schedule later than planned, leaving Marcus with a choice between rushing home to change before the bank's closing time, or simply heading there directly in the clothes he was already wearing. He chose the latter, reasoning, as he often did, that his identity and his account standing had never once required any particular outward presentation to be recognized and properly served at a branch he'd visited regularly for years. He picked up his 2 children from school afterward as originally planned, a detail that would matter to how the rest of that particular afternoon unfolded. He had no way of knowing, walking into that downtown branch still in his grass-stained work clothes, that the regular cashier who typically recognized him on sight was out sick that day, replaced by Melissa Grant, a newer employee who had never previously interacted with Marcus at all. Melissa Grant had worked as a teller at that particular branch for just under 8 months, transferring from a different location within the same banking chain, after expressing interest in what she'd understood to be a branch serving a higher volume of business and high-net-worth clients. A professional environment she found considerably more appealing than her previous, more routine retail banking position. Melissa had developed, over those 8 months, a specific unspoken set of assumptions about what their branch's typical high-value clientele looked like. Assumptions shaped considerably more by casual stereotype than by any actual data about the branch's diverse client base. A bias that had never been seriously challenged or corrected by her branch manager, who remained largely unaware of the specific pattern developing in how Melissa approached certain customers differently than others. Her colleagues would later describe her, in the aftermath of this story's central incident, as generally competent in her actual banking duties, though several noted, one specifically asked, a pattern they'd previously found uncomfortable but hadn't felt empowered to formally address, a tendency to treat certain customers, particularly those whose appearance didn't match her own internal assumptions about wealth and status, with a noticeably different, more dismissive demeanor than she extended to customers who more closely fit those same assumptions. Melissa had no specific animosity toward Marcus personally, having never met him before that particular Tuesday afternoon. What she carried instead was something considerably more insidious in its own way, an unexamined, reflexive bias that led her to make an instant, confident judgment about his account status and his right to the branch's services, based entirely on his casual, work-stained appearance, without bothering to perform the basic verification her actual job required. Marcus stepped up to Melissa's counter at just past 3 in the afternoon, greeting her with the same easy, unremarkable politeness he extended to every service interaction in his daily life, entirely unaware that his casual appearance was about to trigger a very specific, very public dismissal. "Afternoon," Marcus said. "I need to process a business transfer between 2 of my accounts here. Should be pretty straightforward. I've done this exact transaction at this branch several times before." Melissa looked him up and down, her expression shifting into a polite but unmistakably condescending smile, taking in the grass stains on his t-shirt, the worn work boots, the casual, unhurried manner that apparently registered, in her own quick internal calculation, as inconsistent with someone who might genuinely hold significant business accounts at their particular branch. "Sir, this branch handles high-value business accounts," Melissa said, her voice carrying clearly enough that the 2 customers waiting in line behind Marcus turned to look. "I think you might be looking for a different location. Maybe try the branch closer to the east side. They handle more general retail banking over there." Marcus stood there for a moment, absorbing the specific, deliberate condescension embedded in her suggestion, understanding immediately exactly what assumption she'd made about him without bothering to check a single detail of his actual account information. "I appreciate the suggestion," Marcus said, his voice remaining calm, giving no outward indication of the considerable authority he actually held within the very institution employing her. "But I think I'll wait for someone else to assist me instead." Marcus stepped aside from Melissa's counter, moving toward a nearby seating area. watching quietly as Melissa continued serving other customers with a visibly different demeanor than she'd extended to him. A specific, uncomfortable pattern Marcus had witnessed more times throughout his life and career than he cared to count. Roughly 10 minutes later, the branch's manager, a woman named Patricia Delgado who had worked at that particular location for nearly 6 years, and had met Marcus personally on several previous occasions related to his significant business holdings within the bank, emerged from her office and immediately recognized him sitting in the waiting area. "Mr. Whitfield," Patricia said, genuine warmth and surprise evident in her voice as she crossed the branch floor toward him. "I didn't realize you were in today. Is everything all right? Has someone been helping you?" The branch fell into a sudden, uncomfortable silence, several customers and staff members turning to register exactly what Patricia's greeting implied about the identity of the man Melissa had just directed toward a different location entirely. Melissa's face went visibly pale, watching her branch manager greet the same man she'd just dismissed with a warmth and deference that made absolutely no sense given her own recent assessment of his standing. "Actually, Patricia," Marcus said, his voice remaining calm despite the considerable authority now evident to everyone watching, "I was told this branch might not be the right location for someone like me. Perhaps you can help me understand exactly what that meant." Patricia's expression shifted rapidly from genuine warmth to a controlled, professional alarm as she began piecing together exactly what had transpired during the 10 minutes before her own emergence from her office, understanding, with immediate and considerable concern, exactly how serious this specific situation had just become. "Mr. Whitfield, I am so deeply sorry. Please let's step into my office so I can personally handle whatever you need, and so we can address this properly." Marcus followed Patricia into her office, where she immediately pulled up his full account information, confirming for the benefit of everyone still watching from the branch floor exactly what Melissa had failed to verify before making her own snap judgment. Marcus Whitfield held not simply a standard business account at that branch, but a controlling ownership position in the holding company that owned the entire regional banking chain outright. "I need to understand exactly what happened at Melissa's counter," Patricia said, her voice carrying the specific, controlled urgency of someone recognizing the severity of a situation that extended considerably beyond typical customer service concerns. Marcus explained the interaction calmly and factually, without exaggeration or particular emotional emphasis, simply laying out exactly what Melissa had said and the specific assumptions embedded in her suggestion that he try a different branch entirely. Patricia listened with visible, growing distress, understanding both the immediate, serious problem of how a valued client and majority owner had just been treated, and the broader, more troubling pattern his account suggested about how Melissa might have been treating other customers throughout her 8 months at that particular branch. Patricia initiated an immediate review of Melissa's recent customer service history, pulling internal notes, reviewing available security footage from recent weeks, and speaking, over the following 2 days, with several colleagues who worked alongside Melissa on a regular basis. What that review revealed extended considerably beyond the single incident with Marcus, confirming a pattern several of Melissa's coworkers had privately noticed, but hadn't felt sufficiently empowered or supported to formally report through the bank's internal channels. Security footage showed at least 4 other instances over the preceding 2 months where Melissa had directed customers, whose casual appearance apparently didn't match her own internal assumptions about the branch's expected clientele, toward different locations or delayed their service considerably longer than customers she'd assessed more favorably. One particularly troubling instance involved an elderly black woman who had, according to footage timestamps, waited nearly 20 minutes at Melissa's counter for basic account assistance that other, more favorably assessed customers received within minutes of approaching the same counter. This wasn't a single isolated lapse in judgment, Patricia told her own regional supervisor, presenting the full scope of what her review had uncovered. This was a consistent pattern of discriminatory treatment that our existing oversight systems failed to catch or address until it happened to intersect with our majority shareholder specifically. That failure is as concerning to me as Melissa's own individual behavior. Marcus, informed of the full pattern Patricia's review had uncovered, made clear, in a follow-up conversation with both Patricia and the bank's regional human resources director, exactly how he wanted this specific situation handled. I want to be clear that my primary concern here isn't personal, Marcus said. I've dealt with exactly this kind of assumption more times in my life than I can count, and honestly, most days, it simply rolls off me at this point. What concerns me considerably more is the pattern your review uncovered. An employee who has apparently been making these same discriminatory judgments about multiple customers over several months. Customers who didn't happen to have my particular standing within this institution to trigger any meaningful review of their treatment. The bank's human resources director, working alongside Patricia, made the decision to terminate Melissa's employment immediately, citing the documented pattern of discriminatory customer treatment as a clear violation of the institution's professional conduct standards, a decision Marcus, while not personally directing it, fully supported once presented with the complete scope of what the internal review had revealed. Melissa was informed of her termination the following morning, the specific pattern documented across multiple customer interactions, leaving considerably less room for the kind of defense or mitigation that a single, isolated incident might have potentially supported. Marcus used the specific, uncomfortable revelations from this incident to push for broader institutional changes across the entire banking chain, working directly with senior leadership over the following months to implement more robust customer service training, and considerably more significantly, a formal, confidential reporting system allowing both customers and employees to flag concerning patterns of discriminatory treatment without needing a majority shareholder to personally experience the same treatment before meaningful action followed. The most troubling part of this entire situation, to me, wasn't actually what happened at that counter, Marcus said, in comments he later shared with senior bank leadership during a broader discussion about the incident's implications. It was understanding how many other customers had likely experienced something similar, without any of the institutional attention my own situation happened to generate. That gap between how quickly this got addressed once it affected me directly, and how invisible it clearly was before that, is exactly the kind of systemic problem I want us seriously addressing, not just this one specific employee's individual failure. The bank implemented mandatory quarterly bias training across all branch locations within the following 6 months, alongside a considerably strengthened internal complaint system designed specifically to surface exactly the kind of pattern that had gone unaddressed in Melissa's specific case, for nearly 8 months before Marcus's own experience finally triggered a full review. 2 years removed from that Tuesday afternoon incident, Marcus Whitfield continues his deliberately grounded, unpretentious approach to daily life, maintaining the same casual personal presentation and deep community involvement that had, ironically, triggered the entire situation with Melissa Grant in the first place. He speaks occasionally, when specifically asked, about the incident's broader implications, careful to frame the conversation less around his own personal experience, and more around the systemic pattern it revealed about how easily discriminatory treatment can persist within an institution until it happens to intersect with someone whose standing forces immediate attention. I think about that elderly woman who waited 20 minutes at that same counter more than I think about my own experience that day, Marcus said, in one of his rare public comments addressing the incident. My situation got resolved within 20 minutes of my branch manager recognizing who I was. Her situation, and probably several others like it, simply went unaddressed, because the system wasn't actually built to catch this kind of pattern until it happened to inconvenience someone with enough standing to force a full review. That's the part of this story I most want people to actually sit with, considerably more than the specific details of what happened to me personally. Patricia Delgado remains the branch manager at that same downtown Houston location, having implemented, alongside the broader institutional changes Marcus pushed for, her own additional layer of regular customer service auditing specifically designed to catch exactly the kind of pattern that had gone unnoticed under her own management for nearly 8 months before that Tuesday afternoon finally brought it fully into view.
Thanks for tuning in and watching to the end. Drop your comments below. Please take a moment to subscribe. Give this video a thumbs up. It truly helps this channel grow. I appreciate your support.